Now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar from the Women in Technology virtual group. I'm Kathy Kellenberger, co-leader of the group, and our group typically hosts one webinar per month by a woman in our community. You can find all the recordings from our meetings on YouTube. Please check out our homepage where you will find lots of information about what's going on with us and with women presenting for us in other chapters and SQL Saturdays. And please, if you're not already a member, join our virtual group. And you can also follow us on Twitter. Past virtual groups would not be possible without the generosity of some wonderful sponsors. We're really lucky because we have two sponsors, SentryOne and Redgate. And as part of the funds that these sponsors provide, we are able to award gift cards to a lucky viewer each month. And if you're the winner, I'll send you an email letting you know. Today's webinar is special. This one is in particular sponsored by Redgate. We like to promote women speaking at events, especially SQL Saturdays, and there are several SQL Saturdays coming up, including Nashville. You can see there's quite a few women speaking at that, and Linz, Austria, not Australia, Austria this month. And in February, we have Cleveland, again, quite a few women speaking there. And if you go to these SQL Saturdays, I really encourage you to support these women speaking, attend some of their sessions. There are also several webinars coming up. On January 8th, Erin Stellato is speaking on planned forcing for the DBA Fundamentals group. On February 12th, Bobby Jo Brighton will be speaking for our chapter, winning the head game in 2019. And when she spoke for us before, people were really excited about her session. Lots of great feedback from that one. And Kimberly Tripp is speaking on optimizing stored procedures, also for the DBA Fundamentals group on March 5th. We're still in the planning stages. We're hoping to do 3 webinars during March. So if you're interested in speaking, please reach out. Today's session is Get Inspired. Celebrate the careers of 3 DevOps heroes with Kendra Little. And there's Kendra. As Marian Wright Edelman said, you can't be what you can't see. In this 30-minute talk, Kendra Little will discuss the work of 3 DevOps heroes who happen to all be women. You'll learn how these champions have impacted the practices of developers and DBAs worldwide, the software that they've brought to market, and the benefits they've unlocked for their organization. Whether or not you currently work in DevOps, thinking about the insights that we gain from these heroes will open your mind about your career opportunities and help you think outside traditional career paths. Kendra is a Microsoft certified master, and I think she is one of just a small number of women. Actually, there's a small number of people who have this certification. Kendra is one of the very few women that have it. She's also a Microsoft Data Platform MVP, and she's been working in deployment of DevOps for a long time. She went on to become a DBA for Microsoft, and she's been a teacher. She has a wonderful website called SQL Workbooks, and I'm really happy to say she joined Redgate last year. She's one of our product evangelists, so really exciting for us. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute Kendra, and then, one more thing. If you have questions, please just type them in the question box, and Kendra will answer all your questions. And yes, we will have the recording available. We'll probably go out tomorrow. So I'm going to mute myself, and take it away, Kendra.
Thank you so much, Kathy. All right, let's get this screen showing. So let's see if I can actually show the correct screen. That's important in showing slides here. So I'll get that set there, and then we'll get started today. Today we are talking about 3 DevOps heroes. So what I wanted to share today, I think Kathy introduced me really well, so I'm going to go ahead and skip the bio slide here. But what I wanted to share today is stories about three people who in the world of DevOps have really inspired me and just sort of, been glowing lights of when I encountered their work or I encountered them. I was like, you are doing really awesome things. And when I was thinking about doing a session for the Women in Technology chapter, I was thinking about a bunch of different topics, but then I just realized, the three biggest heroes I have in the world of DevOps all happen to be women. So doing a webcast, just talking about what I think is so cool about their jobs, I think is helpful. Now, a couple disclaimers. Like Kathy said, this webcast is sponsored by Redgate. You're going to see the word Redgate on these slides because it's a Redgate slide deck. But these folks do not all work for Redgate. Now, one of them does work for Redgate, and I'll tell you why I think she's such an exciting person. But these folks, other than Stephanie, who does work for Redgate, there's no endorsement of Redgate by the folks I'm featuring. I just think they're awesome. And similarly, Redgate isn't, there's no, crossway endorsement there. It's really just that I think the stories of what these folks are doing in their career, it's inspired me and really opened up my mind about how your career, my career path might be, and I think it can open your mind about what your career path might be, how you look for different opportunities, both in your current job and in future jobs, and how you talk about opportunities to other people as well, how you mentor other people. So I think these stories are really important in terms of thinking about people who change our technical community at large, thinking about people who help make the software that we use, and thinking about people who can affect change in their companies and dramatically change the way their coworkers are able to get things done and improve that. So I want to talk about examples of each of those things. I'll be talking today about Dr. Forrest Curran, about Stephanie Hare, and about Srija Pulagura, who are three people who've really inspired me. Now, at the end of this talk, I have about 30 minutes of content here, but we do have the webcast open for longer. So if you have career questions that you want to ask that just come to mind as we're talking through these stories, or questions about anything DevOps related, really anything you want to ask, feel free to go ahead, like Kathy said, put those in the questions box, and we do have absolutely time we can take for discussion at the end. We can go up to a full hour if folks want to chat and discuss things there. So let's go ahead and get started with these three stories. First up is Dr. Forrest Curran. And Nicole Forrest Curran, now, this is a photo just of her LinkedIn page, and it says, this is a recent change, she's in research and strategy at Google. Dr. Forrest Curran is famous mostly for starting up a company called DORA, the DevOps Research Group, and publishing a lot of research from there. They were just very recently acquired by Google in December of 2018. So used to, it said it used to say, hey, she's the CEO of DORA, but now she's an entrepreneur whose business has been acquired by Google. We hope, I think a lot of us in the world are hoping that although this acquisition by Google has happened, that she will continue to do the research and publish the research that she has become famous for, because it really has changed a lot of the DevOps community. Her book is called Accelerate, The Science of Lean Software and DevOps. And this book talks about how you can measure what you are doing and how you can compare yourself to other DevOps performers. And this is based upon a lot of research that she's done using surveys. The surveys over the years, I'm going to go ahead one slide here. The surveys are all available for free. So if you're not ready to buy a book, that's fine. If you go to the URL at the bottom of this slide, devops-research.com/research.html, there are links to all of the state of DevOps reports over the years. The 2018 report back to, I think it's 4 or 5 years that the reports have been coming out. Each year, a big survey goes out, and she asks folks about their release practices, business practices, processes. And she uses analysis and research on these to quantify and measure which practices predict being able to release very quickly. And also she looks at the quality of the releases. How many outages happen? How many releases cause performance problems, that kind of thing. So she can draw conclusions about how practices that people are doing relate to outcomes that people have in their businesses. And it's scientific information that can help you figure out how to solve problems. And these individual reports are published free. The book Accelerate covers multiple years of that survey data. And you can get it from libraries, you can get it on Amazon. There's a lot of different sources from this. But I wanted to talk about, in reading this book, there's a lot of, my copy of this book is just highlighted like crazy. But the three biggest things that, like, you know, it was like a giant light bulb went off over my head of just like, wow, is there's a point that she makes. And there is, by the way, she does have co-authors here. I don't want to discredit anyone. Nicole Forsgren is the primary author of this. Jez Humble and Jean Kim are co-authors of the book, and they also work on the individual research too. So I'm not sure who individually came up with these ideas, but Dr. Forsgren is the primary researcher. They point out that global outcomes make a huge difference, and they refer to this concept, the wall of confusion. And it seems so obvious now, but after I don't know how many years in the industry, I'd never really thought about the fact that traditionally we use separate outcomes to measure success of IT and success of development. IT is measured on outcomes of stability and performance. Is the system available and fast for our customers? That is the outcomes IT is measured on. But development is typically measured on release tempo, a delivery of features. How quickly were we able to get new features to the people, the end users? And the fact that these are not global outcomes, the fact that these teams are measured individually creates this wall of confusion between them where changes are, kind of batted back and forth. Because if I'm on the ops side and the outcome of getting features to users is not very important to me, and stability is important to me, why would I want to release a change when the system is stable? If I'm a developer and I'm really being rewarded on delivery of features to customers, why would I want to work on stabilizing long-term quality of existing features and stability outcomes, right? Because that's not the main thing I'm awarded on. So this idea of changing outcomes and measuring teams globally, from how we just approach, hey, what is your mission, and aligning towards the customer is really helpful. There's absolutely a ton more in this book that I think is useful, both conceptually. There's something called Brooks Law, and Brooks Law is about how adding people to a software project, if it's late, if we have a software project that's late, adding on more people just makes it slower rather than faster, and how using DevOps techniques, they found in the studies, larger teams, adding people to teams, you can scale project releases with larger teams. Now, I will say you should read the book. It's not a one-to-one comparison exactly with Brooks Law. It is an interesting comparison, and I thought it kind of blew my mind in terms of scalability, but they aren't just asking questions about, teams who are late. There's lots in the book about both DevOps as well as lean software tools, hence the name there, the science of lean software and DevOps. And I think her contribution with this research is just really amazing. Now, we sometimes look at these folks who've published a lot of, they speak at a lot of conferences and they've published lots of research, and we're like, well, that's them and they're special people. And they were just like, from the beginning, they were just sort of inspired from the start and they're a genius. Well, we can tell a lot in looking at how someone got here, and this isn't just for Dr. Forrester, this is for everybody. I think it's always interesting to look at someone's history of their career and say, how did they get here? Well, according to her LinkedIn profile, she started out with an undergraduate degree and then became a software engineer at IBM. And I think that's just really interesting that she later on went into academia, but before she went into research, she did work for a while in building software, doing analyst jobs, becoming a consultant, and then said, I'm going to go back and work more on research. And she earned a doctorate at the University of Arizona. But one interesting thing is that career progress for a lot of us, I think this is really normal. It's not always a straight line. She then did some work related to accounting, right? Sometimes we have interests and we go a little direction and we specialize in it and maybe we even get a degree in it. And she taught for a while. And then eventually she founded Dora. So we don't always go in a straight line, and we don't always become entrepreneurs right out of college. Don't shut those things off from your ideas of yourself. And I'm not saying you have to go back and get an advanced degree, but I do think if you're the kind of person who that's really what you want, that is an option. And I say this as someone whose partner has gone back for an advanced degree. I don't want any more degrees. I'm done with that personally. But it's one of those things that know that career progression isn't always a straight line. With people who are very, very well-known and successful, I think it's normal that, sometimes we go this way and then we turn around a little bit. And then sometimes we really find our stride with something and just really make something of it. And maybe that happens more than once in your career, and that's totally fine. And in fact, I think that's normally what happens. I think it's also interesting that Dr. Forrest Curran exemplifies how if you have a passion for research and for theory, you can also contribute very practically in the modern world, because a lot of what the power of Dr. Forrest Curran's work is making her findings really accessible to people and readable to people. So she combines doing heavy research with making it freely accessible, and freely in the sense that each of the individual year reports are available free for download too, which I think is genius and part of the contribution of why this has impacted the way so many teams do business, in terms of saying, is using lean methods, is using DevOps something that could help us? So she's had a huge impact, and that ability to combine research with practice is a big part of it. So she's a huge name in the world of DevOps, rightfully so, and is one of the major people driving this forward. The second person I want to talk about is Stephanie Hare, and Stephanie's currently out of the office. She's in Mexico right now, so I don't think she'll be watching this live, but hello to Stephanie if you watch the recording, and hello to Dr. Forrest Curran if you ever watch this too. Stephanie is a product manager at Redgate, so I get to work with Stephanie. And Stephanie has a really fascinating career. Redgate Software is the first that I know who published and created tools for DevOps for SQL Server. And this was a big gamble at the time. The history of DevOps is really such that Gene Kim, who's one of the folks who co-authored Dr. Forrest Curran research, he said a quote that I think is really true, that databases are a very high spend area, but are relatively impoverished when it comes to process. I think that's completely true. There's a lot of fear around automating deployments to databases because it's such a risky area. If we mess things up, things can go really wrong. So back in the day, spending money on developing tools to do source control and automation for databases is not a big, obvious selling point at all. And there is a person who has been with the SQL source control product, which is the first product I ever heard of that specialized in how to take the code in a database and get it into a state for versioning and help manage that versioning process. Stephanie has been part of that journey from the initial version of that. She was the concept for SQL source control came from a fellow named David Atkinson, and Stephanie joined Redgate as a project manager, and she was part of the initial pitch to the board of directors saying, this is something we should launch to the project, and then stayed with it as a development manager, and now is the head of product management for all of database DevOps at Redgate. So in terms of who is the person who really has shaped these products and has really listened to users and tried to figure out what is the way these tools can work best with the database, Stephanie Hare is that person, and she is a real guiding light at Redgate. I've just recently joined the company, and when you join a company, you meet a lot of people and you start getting this sense of the relationship between different groups and how communication works and all of that. And quickly you start to identify people who are like special nodes in the communication among groups. They seem to be connected to a lot of people. They have a lot of influence. And one interesting thing is that these people are not always the loudest people in the room. It took me a little while to meet Stephanie because it's not, she's not an overbearing presence at all. She is a very powerful listener, and she's very good at communicating as well. So she's this source of ideas and inspiration for people, as well as having this expert technical understanding in the area, which is incredibly inspiring. And I think is the reason that she has been so successful at growing all of the database DevOps software products and guiding them at Redgate as a company. And her contributions, I think, are just huge. Interestingly enough, when you look at Stephanie's career, she started out as she did get a degree. So, I mean, I'm sure she was born and all of that stuff. So it's not exactly how she started out. But in terms of her career, after she got her undergrad degree, she worked as a database engineer and agile release manager for 8 years. So she worked in a combination ops and development job before she ever got into making software. She did get a master's in software engineering at Penn State before she joined on as a product manager and nurtured the, sort of helped bring along the initial product of SQL source control forward. And from working with Stephanie, I think one of the things, and this is the thing that I actually, in my career, have seen that is tough to do, but she shows that you can start your career in more of an applied operations style job and then switch over to a software engineering company and grow software. Now, one of the things she did to make that happen was she got a master's in software engineering. I don't think that's absolutely required in terms of making that transition, but I think it probably does make it easier for it, because this is a transition that long ago in my career I tried to make and I had a really hard time doing it. I tried to get a job as a program manager, and I just didn't know enough about the job I was going into, but it is absolutely possible to make that leap between the world of operations and the world of leading a team to craft software. Also from Stephanie, one of the things I've learned is that really being interested in your subject matter, I don't think it's absolutely required, but it definitely helps. And you can feel it when you talk to someone, when the problem, when you're working on something and you're solving problems and you're actually really interested in those problems, that shows in everything you work with, and it makes work more interesting when you are able to find the interesting problems. Now, one of the ways I suspect that Stephanie does this, just from observing what she communicates about, is she thinks a lot about the people using the software. And she sits in on different calls and interviews those people and asks them and listens to them in terms of what is hard for them, what is it, the difficult tasks to overcome, where's the friction with the tools they're currently using, and thinking about the possibilities for things that could help. And that technique of thinking about the users and taking time out to talk to them and communicate with them directly, even is, I think, something that can help bring interest into that subject matter. Because I think for me, it's inherently more interesting when I understand the person who could be helped by something and their use case. It just makes it intrinsically easier for me to be passionate about it. And I've noticed that Stephanie really does that too. She brings back insights from her interactions with customers in a very powerful way, and it helps fuel that engagement. The third person I want to talk about is actually with us on the call today. It's Rita Pulagura, and I met Srija at a conference, and this is one of those times that I don't know if this happens to everybody. It may be in part because I'm a presenter, but I was just chatting with Srija, and we were talking a bit about her work, and I just immediately just had this thought of like, wow, I would love to see you present about this sometime, just talking about lessons that you've learned and how this works, because you are doing awesome things in a company. People are inspiring in different ways, right? So I've talked about Dr. Forrest Curran, who speaks publicly, does a lot of research. I've talked about Stephanie Hare, who makes software that impacts a lot of people. But there's other ways that we impact people, which is just impacting the people at our job and helping our processes and our tools, like bring in new tools and helping people do things better. That has a huge direct impact on people. There's all these different ways we can impact people. There's kind of the indirect, more indirect, helping provide tools, and then just directly helping implementation. And in a very humble way, Srija explained that at her company, there was a project that was starting up about adopting DevOps practices. It wasn't her idea. And she wasn't, at first glance, it wasn't like love at first sight. She wasn't born with a passion for DevOps, but she took a chance on this project and said, I'll try this out. And she was working with multiple teams and learning new technologies, learning new tools like, Jenkins and all sorts of different tools for source control, for automation, for helping make these things better. So she's learning the tools and working with different teams and identifying, hey, who is the best team to help, for this first? Who will be the team who can adopt this in the way that they'll be the most successful, the fastest? And it's not always easy to identify that team. I know that from personal experience, having worked in a build ops job with multiple teams. Figuring out, okay, who's ready to change their processes right now is hard because development teams do want to keep shipping changes. But she kept on going and has had great success with what traditionally is the most difficult team whose processes should change, the database team. And I was just so inspired by her story and how normal it was to her. That's part of it too, is when we do these things in our jobs, sometimes when we're, part of a task, and she said, it wasn't my idea, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be your idea, but having the persistence to execute on this and having the persistence to keep learning these tools is really remarkable and inspiring. So how did Srija get here? First, she got a degree in mechanical engineering, a Bachelor of Engineering in Mechanical Engineering, and then she went on to get an advanced degree from Carnegie Mellon. She did an internship and then became a developer for Teach for America. So Srija, if are you unmuted right now? Let's see if I can unmute you just in case you want to comment after I've said all of this stuff about you. What's really connected me to your story is that the perseverance that you so calmly showed when I was talking to you about this, and how you took the time to look deeper into the project and find out that it was for you. Is there anything you want to share with, how do you become persistent at this? When you're kind of I find learning new tools to be pretty difficult. I don't take to it right away. So when you're bringing in all these tools together and figuring out which tools do we want to use, how are they going to work best for you? Is that just naturally easy for you, or is there things you do to kind of make it easier?
Thank you, Kendra, for your kind words. Well, to answer your question, as a developer, I'm always curious to learn new technologies and new skills. So in our team or company, I see everyone is curious about what's coming up next, or what are the other options out there. So like you shared in the introduction, when this project came up, I was like, this is cool because I get to work with new technologies as my full-time job and not have some ideas in the back of my mind like, oh, I'm curious about something, or how about I try something else? And having that opportunity as my full-time job really excited me. And true, there are challenges, but my team has been extremely helpful, and initially it was like, okay, I have to do this. I have no idea how this certain technology works or how we can finish, but there was just a deadline that we have to get this done by a certain date. So I started poking around, experimenting, reading documentation. I always go back to my team, like my manager, his manager, and I'm like, okay, I tried all these things. You have any other suggestions, ideas? Maybe I have to take a different course. So I got into this a routine of first giving a good shot and then thinking about that. And if it's still not going as fast as I expect, then I would go back to my team. So this cycle of like trying, learning, discussing with the team, eventually I got used to that, and that kept me persistent. And like you said, the results weren't obvious in the beginning, but when other teams started coming back to us saying, oh, we like what you have implemented for us or what you have automated for us, and we want to have more of those automated solutions, it slowly started building the momentum and kept me going further after that.
That's fantastic. That's actually what you described there really is helpful to me too. Just there is a lot of, like, just in the job that I have of evangelist, a lot of what evangelists do is we constantly have to learn new technologies and then figure out how to solve problems for people. And that cycle you described of, okay, let's go out, let's do research, let's try to build something. In my case, it's usually building a repro, and then let's go back to the team, let's analyze it, and maybe do that circle again. But yeah, I get in trouble if I just only go out and research and don't circle back to the team. Like at that point, I'll get really frustrated and maybe like get off course. But that circle of, okay, let's build something, let's see how we did, let's check in with other people, and keep going around does help me keep the experimentation going without getting stuck too much.
Yeah. And it's not natural in the beginning. Like we get, as developers or technologists, we get really passionate and we get really deep down in what we are researching. But my team told me that don't get lost in all the research and trying to figure out. Don't get disappointed if something is not turning out as you expect. Just come back to us and tell us. We all can figure out as a team. So they encouraged me a lot, saying that, okay, if you are spending more than any time between 15 minutes to, let's say, 1 or 2 hours, that's fine. Now time to review. So I practiced that initially. Now I'm like, okay, I don't get taken down when something is not going forward at the speed I expect. And also the development cycles we follow Scrum and Sprint cycles. So having the DevOps task as a sprint story and breaking it down into manageable pieces, that also helps a lot.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. Stephanie actually had a funny story she shared with me, in that, like, when they first started SQL Source Control, like when it was the very, beginning, the 1.0 project, they were the first team to ever use Scrum at the company. And Simon, the founder of the company, just referred to it as the stickies and whiteboard approach. Like, which is when you walk into like a team using Scrum often, you're like, yeah, there's a lot of stickies and a whiteboard here. But they were, like, it starts at companies at different times, and that process of limiting work in progress, like you're talking about, taking work in small chunks, can be really helpful. The sticky note on whiteboards approach.
That's one way of doing Scrum.
Yeah, it is. It's true. It's not the only way. There are still, having visited Cambridge recently, I would like to say that Redgate may be one of the largest consumers of sticky notes in the world. There's a lot of sticky notes around. They involve drawings of all sorts of things, like pizza. They aren't always technical. But yeah, I embrace the sticky note as well. So I don't see questions in the Q&A panel, but I do see that we've got a bunch of folks in the audience here. So at this point, if you guys have any questions that you would like to talk about in terms of anything we've talked about or anything else, I put some example questions on this slide, but I'm not assuming that these are your questions. Now, if you do want us to talk to any of these questions, feel free to use one of these questions. But I'm really curious just what if there are things that you have on your mind. You will get to remain anonymous. I may say your first name if your first name is not easily identifiable to your employees, but you can ask questions that you might not ask in front of your colleagues here if you're thinking about changing a job or something like that in the audience. But let's see, so if folks are not yet ready to ask some questions, I actually would love to get some input from Srija and Kathy on this question of, are advanced degrees needed? Like if you want to become, like, because one of the things I just noticed, and I didn't realize this until I was writing up the slides, is all of the people I featured actually have an advanced degree. And I was like, huh, is there something to this? So in terms of making a lot of change, how helpful is having an advanced degree, a master's degree or a higher? Or is it something that's just nice to have? Is it something that's really needed? What do you guys think? What have you found in terms of advanced degrees?
I'll answer. I also have a master's degree. However, I feel like it was a box I wanted to check. I don't know that it's helped me that much. I feel like just working in the field, consulting, I learned so much just consulting, where you just kind of go into a company, you don't know anything about their infrastructure, and you've got to learn very quickly. That seems to me better than any degree I could ever get. But and I also work, teaching people in a nonprofit organization where our students are non-traditional. Our students are, probably all of them are high school graduates, but may not even have bachelor's degrees. And a lot of them are disadvantaged backgrounds. So I don't know. I mean, maybe for DevOps, maybe there's some things with engineering that maybe will be helpful. But in general, I just don't feel like it.
Right. Experience, I think, does play a lot into it.
Right.
How about you, Srija? Did you find a lot of jobs that were like, oh, we want an advanced degree? Or how have you found things?
Okay, from my experience, I did my master's degree right after my undergrad, and I did my college education in India, and I did my master's in here. So to move from one country to the other, from one job market to the other, advanced degree helped me there. There are people who also move to different job markets without any advanced degree. But what I liked about my experience is I had colleagues and classmates from across the world. So having that exposure in a university and in a classroom setting to learn with them and see different perspectives, I gained so much from there. And coming into the job after my advanced degree, I was more equipped than I was before. And also gave me new ideas or new openings. Like I was not aware of different work streams or how. I also saw that it was common for people to move from one field to the other. Advanced degree does definitely make that easier. I've seen some of my classmates who had a business background, but they have done their master's in information systems. So moving from one field to the other also becomes easier with advanced degree. But like Kathy said, maybe it's not necessary, but it did help me a lot from my experience.
Yeah. And for folks who are watching, I actually didn't know this until last year. At least in the United States, if you have, say, a bachelor's degree in English and you want to get a master's degree in computer science, for example, you actually don't have to go back and get a whole nother bachelor's degree in computer science. A lot of universities will allow you to do sort of a post-baccalaureate where you do some of the undergraduate coursework, kind of core coursework, and then are able to work towards a master's degree without having to go back and complete an entire 4-year degree. So just, I didn't know that until a couple of years ago, and I was like, oh, well, that's kind of handy. So if you do actually have a passion for it and you have a degree in a different area, it might not be as long of a trip. I mean, it's definitely a lot of work, but it might not be as long of a trip as you would immediately think.
Yeah, so like you said, some countries' university system, it's not flexible enough. Mm-hmm. So if someone is from a background where they want to switch to a different stream of work, then getting an advanced degree in the US is one of the options they can take.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not endorsing or not supporting anything, but this is all my personal experience. Mm-hmm.
One interesting thing that has come up in the news lately, I actually saw an article about this, was that some major tech companies, a lot of them, Google, IBM, they no longer even require a bachelor's degree. So they used to have a hiring requirement that, okay, you have to have an undergraduate degree to get a job here, but they've removed those. I actually think this is great in the sense that partly in the sense that degrees are becoming so expensive that it doesn't make sense for everyone to get degrees. But outside of that, we should be looking at candidates and judging them based upon how are they going to be excellent at doing their job, not just have they attained a degree. Like ideally, the degree makes you do well on the interview, not just like, hey, I've checked this box type thing. Now, that being said, it's still really hard to get jobs at those companies, right? But I do think it makes sense that we don't just look at, do you have these letters next to your name? We judge people more on things we can actually measure and predict on. So that's an interesting positive change too. I think the hardest question here is, what if my company doesn't want me to innovate? Of all the questions on here, I think that's the most interesting one, because I think there are some companies, like, what if I'm interested in innovating, but I work at a company that doesn't want me to innovate? Is there room for inspiring innovation, or is it more like, well, you're better off just looking for a job at a company that does want you to innovate? What do you guys think about that? Now, Rita, I know you do work at a company that wants you to innovate, so I'm not suggesting you have this problem. But if someone were to pose that question to you, what would be your thoughts on what they should do?
Okay, so I think you can still brainstorm ideas and pitch into your team or present to your manager and tell them that I have this idea about changing a process or a new way of doing things, a better way of doing things. And there's no harm in sharing the ideas. It may or may not pick up, but once it's out there, I have seen eventually it will gather momentum, and sometimes people might come back to you saying, you presented that idea and now is the right time, so how about we talk further about that? So I would say present it to people and just put it out there, and if you have the time and capacity, you can develop a short POC, but definitely focus on your expected deliverables. And if you can have something to show, that'll also have more weight during the presentation.
I love it.
So yeah, I agree with what she said. The other thing I would say is that if you have an initial idea that doesn't get accepted, don't let that stop you. I think keep coming up with ideas and be able to really defend those ideas. Make sure you do your research. Make sure you think about what types of things they might come up with, the pros as, the cons as well as the pros. Come up with, look at it from both sides, and, just keep coming up with ideas. And, I look back at, one job where I was a database administrator for a long time. I came up with lots of ideas. I feel like I did a lot of innovation, but were 100% of my ideas accepted? Absolutely not. Maybe 70% were. So that didn't stop me. I still kept coming up with ideas and presented my case. So I think that's it. I think don't be discouraged. Just keep trying and just do your research.
Yeah. When I look back on some of my jobs, I really focused on what are we being measured on and how can I be really, really great at that? And that's important, but I think I really missed, nobody was coming out and saying, hey, we would like you to come up with ideas about how to change stuff around and make it better. Nobody was explicitly saying that, but I actually think that would have done even better than just executing on the plans we already had. Not, like you said, not every idea would have been taken, but looking back on it, I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have just assumed that I was supposed to do what was in my job description. I should have assumed that people wanted me to come up with ideas, which I just sort of didn't. I sort of believed, oh, I'm supposed to just do stuff. But in fact, I think there were opportunities I missed. So yeah, innovation, I think sometimes people can be uncomfortable with it at first, especially sometimes you'll get an idea and people will sort of not go for it right away because it's kind of uncomfortable. But then after it settles in for a little bit, if something comes up again, they may think, oh, actually that idea would, you know what I mean? Give people some time to let it settle in too, because change can be uncomfortable for a lot of people and it may take them a little bit to warm up to it as well. Oh, we have a comment from Andy, or a question. If your company does not want you to innovate, what about learning new skills? If you do not acquire new skills, you will get left behind. Yeah, so that's an interesting one in terms of, I think this is two-sided, Andy, because there are still jobs for COBOL programmers. So it's an interesting world because while old mainframes, physical mainframes have gone away, now we have virtual mainframes and people still writing COBOL on them. So there's this interesting balance in terms of strategy with, obviously I am biased towards learning new skills and really want to agree with you, but I do think it's interesting in that sometimes you find this classic niche where if you really like working on an older technology, sometimes you can still do it for a long time because things are slow to change. What do you guys think about this? Do you agree that if you don't acquire new skills, you're left behind? Which side of this do you fall on?
I really like learning new skills. I'm like you. I love it. I've seen firsthand people that have just basically refused to learn new skills unless their company sent them to a class or bought them a book or, paid for it and made time. And yes, they did get left behind because, you think you have job security, but maybe you don't. Things change so fast. So I know people have things, I'm a mom, I'm a grandma, I want to spend time with my family. But on the other hand, I need to invest in myself, even if my employer doesn't pay for that or encourage that. It's just so easy. I can go out to Kendra's site and sign up and start learning their pass. How much free learning content is there? Hundreds of hours. So I feel like if your company is not encouraging you or paying for it, you still need to invest in yourself. It's still your career. It's not your company's career. It's your career. So that's my take on it.
And keep asking. Keep asking them to pay for it, and ask at different levels. Like if they can't send you to a conference, ask if they can pay for an online training. If they can't pay for an online training, ask if they can pay for some books. Like, right? And just keep in a cheerful way. Keep asking.
Yeah, I think most companies would at least pay for a book. I would think. I hope. They're not that expensive, so.
So Andy has another comment. And I love this one too. Look at what's being done with DBA Tools and how they are automating the DBA processes. Yes, there is and this lines up with what you were just saying, Kathy, about finding extra time. So there's a group of folks who make a set of PowerShell products. It's dbatools.io if you want to go to their website. And it's a community effort of people whose employers are not paying them to do this, and they're helping do things like, oh, do you want to, automate a lot of your environment maintenance with PowerShell? Everything from like backing up, restoring, to working with database users and things like that. So if you're interested in PowerShell, not only could you use these tools, but you could also become a contributor. And I think that's one of the things, that's actually a path that's an alternate path to having an advanced degree in terms of making yourself attractive to an employer. If you are interested in blogging or presenting or contributing to an open source project, those are huge resume builders that I think really can be compelling in a way that advanced degrees can't. Because when someone has an advanced degree, yeah, that's impressive, but like you can't go in and see the code behind it, right? Unless they've also published that. So when you can look at someone's open source contributions, you're like, oh, wow, that's like, not only is it impressive, but I can actually see all, the different paths that they took there. So I think that is another path you can take in terms of, I want to be more of an innovator and I want to kind of build up my resume. Even small contributions to open source projects can help build that up a lot in an interesting way. The folks at dbatools.io are really, really cool. And they're one of those groups that like people joining it have said, hey, they're so helpful. Like when I did my first pull request, I had no idea what I was doing. I just had learned what a pull request was, and they helped walk me through the process and they mentored me. And I just think that's terrific as a community that they do that. So, all right, well, we are getting close to the end here. Should we go ahead and wrap this thing up? I mean, we're close to the hour end. We actually went well past the half hour. What do you guys think?
Keep going.
Oh, are there any questions on here that you're interested in speaking to? We've got, do job titles matter left? We've got, what if I hear about a job that I'm not qualified for? And of course you could suggest more questions too. Let's do job titles. Do job titles matter?
I would say no.
Is it okay to modify your job title on a resume? This is a question that I've gotten for folks, and my answer to this is, in fact, yes. It's okay to modify your job title on the resume. I would put the actual job title in there somewhere because they're probably going to contact people to ask about the job, but I think it's fine to change the heading. What do you guys think in terms of, because I've had some job titles, like at one point I was a software development engineer in test was my official job title. But it was just an HR thing. Like my job had nothing to do with what an SDET does. So I was like, I have to be able to change this job title. I actually did nothing related to that. Have you guys had similar experiences or heard about that? Do you think people should just list the official title?
Well, my title has been close to what I'm doing, or as I switched to DevOps, eventually the job description, everything coded some of the DevOps work I'm doing. So I usually put my actual job title.
Yeah.
Always, not usually.
I did have a situation where my job title did not actually match my job, and it was an unfortunate situation because then not only did I have the responsibilities that I was hired for, I got other responsibilities related to that title. Things that yeah. So, you know, I don't want to give too much information about it because I don't want this company to come back at me. But yeah, it was unfortunate. It was unfortunate that the title did not match in this particular situation. But it might be unusual.
So John, well, no, that makes sense. Like when I was a software development engineer and test, in that case, like our whole team was told this is just an HR thing. And it was just an HR thing. But I get, if you are in this situation, it does make sense to double check that that's going to be the case, or if you're going to get to actually do a bunch of duties that you weren't expecting because the title is different.
Yeah, but they can always, even if you're told up front, they can always, after a year or so, you know, add these other responsibilities, which is what happened to me. So, so that was unfortunate, but
yeah. I think there may be some other cases. I heard from some friends who had visa applications in process that there were certain things that if they were to change in their employment status, they needed to stay the same or the visa process might get messed up. So I think it actually is not uncommon for people to end up with, on paper, a job title that doesn't match what they're doing for various reasons out there, which I do think has made job titles not matter that much anymore. A lot of it is more about the experiences you have at the job and how you're able to describe them, rather than what the job title actually was. What about qualification? How do you guys, in terms of if you were to have somebody come to you and say, hey, there's this really cool job and I really am interested in this, but I think I'm just not qualified. Should I apply? Should they apply or should they not apply?
Well, if it's qualifications like a degree, and if they can have it all comes to how much they have expertise in the task for that job. So if a degree would help, then sure, that's a good idea, or take some courses, because you should be able to do the job well, the one you are interested in, you are excited about. So build that skill set, have that expertise, and then you can go ahead and apply.
Yeah.
How about you, Kathy?
Yeah, on the other hand, so on one hand, women have a tendency to not apply for jobs unless they feel they are fully qualified. So that kind of holds us back from applying for things. So in a situation like this, for myself, being someone who is, you know, somewhat well known in the SQL community, if someone came to me and in particular said, we want you, we know you're not 100% qualified, but we think you'll work well with our team and you'll learn, I think, yes, definitely go for it. If it's not a situation like that, if you just say, hey, here's this great job, but I know nothing, may not be a good idea. But, you know, and maybe it's a goal to set for yourself. Say, hey, look at these great jobs. I'm going to set up a plan and start learning and, you know, and start developing that skill set. But I feel like women are very quick to say they're not qualified when they might be perfectly acceptable. So I kind of put a little caution in there.
Mm-hmm. My take on this is 100% go for it, even if you're completely unqualified. But I say that for a very specific reason, and it's because earlier in my career, like one of the most impactful in a good way job interviews that I went on was a complete disaster. I really wanted the job. I really wasn't qualified for the job. And like, I kind of had my heart broken. I totally didn't get it. Like, it was one of those interview situations where, it was a long interview loop and they cut it off before it ended because it just clearly wasn't going anywhere. Of like, we don't need to extend the suffering. But after that interview, I really thought about, okay, what do I really want? What do I really want to learn? And it actually changed my career course in really important ways. I was inspired to learn about several topics that I had completely bombed during the interview, but it really helped me figure out what are the things I don't know that I should know. And it actually got me started, in that case, on a speaking career and presenting career. So based on the fact that I actually think that even to interviews that don't go well at all, you can learn a ton from getting them. So I'm like, oh no, just go after it. Go after it as hard as you can. It may have some disappointments in it, but you're going to learn stuff if you get an interview. So just go for it. So that's my take on it, based on the fact that horrible interview. Oh my God, it was such a disaster. It was one of those things where the questions kept coming and I just ran out of different ways to say, I don't know, but here's how I would look that up. Like, how many times can you say, I have no idea, but here's the keywords I would search on.
And I think one thing is to make sure that you present, your actual skills. Don't go in and say, I'm a DevOps, I have all this experience, when you don't. So be upfront and honest about your actual, because I had an interview the year before last. It was a couple months before I got the job at Redgate, where I interviewed for a data science position, even though I did not have the experience, but I was learning. And I really would have loved to have gotten that job. Things worked out great because I'm at Redgate. But again, it's like I went ahead and applied for it because I said, hey, I've got all these amazing SQL skills and you need that. And they said, yes, we do. I still didn't get the job, but it was a really great interview. And I feel like if I had been a little bit further along in the classes that I was doing online, I might have gotten it. I just had taken like 1 or 2 courses on edX, and I hadn't gotten to things like regression or machine learning, those areas yet. But anyway, so.
Well, in these emerging areas, especially with, things like machine learning and DevOps and, areas, DevOps has been around for a while, but there aren't a ton of people who have experience in it. I mean, anything regarding database engineering, it's hard to hire people. So in these jobs where it's hard to find people, you've got a chance, even if you don't have experience in that direct area a lot of times. So, you can learn from it. All right, well, now it's 2 minutes past the hour, so now we have gone over time. I feel like it's really fun talking to you guys. This part of the thing was actually my favorite part.
We should do more of these. We should do more of these for the WIT group. Just get a great group of people up here talking and a bunch of questions. I'm going to put you in charge of that, Kendra.
I love coming up with questions, so absolutely for me. And I would actually love to have just a session too where we had people in different jobs just talk about, hey, what's a day in the life like? What advice would you give to yourself 5 years ago? I love that kind of thing. So yeah, I've got a ton of ideas. I'll send them to you.
That would be wonderful. I knew that you come up with the questions like this, so that's why I volunteered you. So
it helps that people send me questions all the time. So.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess. So Kendra, thank you so much for presenting today. It was wonderful. Thank you, Sridhar, for being on the call and participating with us. The video will be out on YouTube, and probably by tomorrow you'll be able to go to the WIT group and just click in the meeting archive and get right to the video if you don't want to go search on YouTube. But anyway, so thanks everyone for attending, and thanks to both of you. So
thanks,
bye.
Kathy. Thanks, Rita.
Thank you,
everybody.
Thank you, Kathy.
Bye.
Bye, folks.